Listen to your body and just eat when you're hungry. I've never heard of shittier piece of advice in my life. Hey, gentlemen, today I'm here to talk with you about one very important topic: energy, the energy that drives our bodies. And I also want to talk about how we can get that energy, how we can keep it consistently feeding our bodies, and how not to become slaves to that energy that we need. We must have energy for our cells in our bodies. Our cells and tissues are fed by glucose. What does glucose mean? It's another word for sugar. And everything we eat, with the exception of fats, contains carbs, which are to the body seen as glucose. So whether you're having a nice piece of red meat or a shitty baguette or some crackers, it's all going to contain some amount of carbs, right? And so carbs are used by the cells and tissues of the body for energy. That's a good thing. We want to have energy. Obviously, we want to have it in the right places and the right amounts. Now, how do you know when you should eat? The truth is we don't, gentlemen. I don't know about you, but I'm not so in tune with my body that I know exactly when to get up in the morning without an alarm. No, if I want to get up early because I have an important meeting, I set the damn alarm and I get up and I just do it, right? If I'm tired and I have to push through that day because I've got something happening that must get done, I do it. I don't always have the luxury of resting when I'm tired. I don't always have the luxury of eating when I'm hungry. And I don't believe that any of us really knows when their body needs another boost of energy. I think that we're not, at least I personally am not so in tune that I know that. So what do? I use, and I'll show you this mechanism in a minute here. I use something very simple. This is a sugar tester. This little device here. It's got a readout, this display here, which when I simply prick my finger with a very tiny needle, I mean, even the most the most infantile among us won't feel it. It doesn't hardly hurt. You prick your finger, get a drop of blood, and you will get an instant readout as to where your sugars are at that moment in time. These devices cost about $50 only, and that includes the test strips that come with it. And you can get it just about anywhere. CVS, Walgreens, Rite Aid. Like I say, about $50, and it could save your life. So let's talk a little bit about glucose and how we know when we've had enough. Essentially, when the body is hungry, there are two things happening, and they conflict with one another. One of these things is that the body will tell you, it'll give you those hunger pangs, right? Oh, I'm hungry. I better go and eat. Now, sometimes it is time to eat. At other times, it's just our addiction to food telling us to eat. And these devices, these sugar testers, there are different kinds in the market. You can get whichever one you want. These sugar testers will tell you whether your glucose, in other words, that energy level circulating in the blood, is high or normal. If it's normal, then yeah, absolutely, go ahead and eat. If it's high, I don't recommend it. Why? Because that's where we get diabetes 2, and that's where we get all kinds of degenerative, negative impacts on the body, including Alzheimer's and dementia, and eventually clogging of the heart, because the plaque starts to create and stick to the atria and the ventricles of our hearts. You don't want that, gentlemen. And that happens to you from those starchy things that we eat. That's the quickest way to clog up your heart, is to have lots and lots of starches, lots and lots of carbs, lots and lots of sugars, lots and lots of fruits and frappuccinos and all that kind of stuff, right? If you're doing that, that's the quickest way to clog up your heart by age 50. A lot of guys need a stent by the time they're 45, 50, 55 years old. And a lot of them aren't even overweight. It's just that they've eaten like peasants, as we've talked about before. So the advantage of the glucose tester is it tells you, are you at the right number? And the right number is typically, I'll write it down for you, somewhere around 82 or high 70s. Very simple. If your sugars, when you test them, are around 82 or in the high 70s, it means your body has gotten rid of the last bunch of glucose or energy that you had. It's digested it. It's gotten to the right place in the body, your cells and tissues, and you're okay. You can eat again now. If you're in the 90s or 100s somewhere, then you have no business eating whatsoever. And the reason why this is so important, as I look at a couple of notes on here, is that The carbs, this is the mechanism through which the energy gets into the body. When we eat anything except fats, like I say, those things, those carbs, go into the bloodstream and are received as glucose. That glucose needs to get pushed out of the bloodstream because it's toxic if it hangs out in the blood too long. We don't want glucose in our blood. We want glucose feeding our cells and tissues of the body, right? So that they can make energy, so that they can do stuff throughout the day. So how do we get from our bloodstream this glucose, which is poisonous if it's left in there too long? How do we get it the hell out of our bloodstream and into the deeper parts of our body, the cells and tissues? Well, that's where the pancreas comes in. Pancreas, when you eat and your blood sugar has gone up, the pancreas says, oh shit, gentlemen, let's get to it. Let's secrete something called insulin. The insulin then goes into that bloodstream and draws out the glucose from the blood and delivers it. Specifically, it pulls it out of the red blood cells, the hemoglobin. That's where glucose is carried. Pulls it out of there and delivers it to nourish the cells and tissues of the body. So now you have the energy throughout the day or days that you need for those tissues. And that's wonderful. So that's the first and second step, right? We've eaten the carbs, it's gone into the blood, pancreas has secreted insulin. The insulin, through a chemical process, pulls those glucose molecules out of the red blood cells and delivers them to the appropriate cells and tissues. So that's basically the steps that are happening here. Now, the wonderful thing about having a body that is healthy is your body can do this process, can accomplish this process relatively quickly. In other words, you've eaten at the right time and in proper amounts, and your body is healthy enough on the inside such that you've eaten, and within an hour, hour and a half, two at the most, you're back to your normal blood sugar level. That's how the body's meant to operate, man. Most of us are doing two things wrong. We're eating too damn much in terms of carbohydrates, especially, and that we talked about before. And that's the peasant food. That's the quickest, cheapest, dirtiest, stupidest way to get your energy. Those are the crackers, the crunchy things, the tortilla chips, the breads, the pastas, the croissants, the muffins. All that stuff is pure shit. Yeah, it's got lots of energy, but it's the wrong kind of energy. It's too dense. It comes in the wrong form, and it just jacks up your body. Specifically, it jacks up your body because it ruins your insulin sensitivity. Let me back up and tell you what that means. The insulin that comes from the pancreas and helps the body to rid itself of the sugars that we have in the bloodstream when we've eaten, that insulin is a wonderful thing. And when we're born or when we're healthy, we only need a tiny drop of insulin to course through our bloodstream and pull out the glucose, right, of the items that we've eaten. As we age, or as we ruin our bodies, we become insulin resistant. That means that now, instead of a drop, you need a freaking flood of insulin to digest or rid your body of the same amount of glucose that you got rid of 10, 20 years ago when you were younger and healthier. Why is this important? Why do we want the body to only need a little bit of insulin? Why do we want to prevent a massive flood of insulin from our pancreas every single time we eat, all day long, all night, for the rest of our lives? Why do we want to prevent that, this rush of insulin? Well, there are many reasons. For us men specifically, the insulin is actually linked to our testosterone levels. It's very difficult to have a healthy level of insulin in your body if you've got very low testosterone in your body. So those two things are linked. We want to have that high or strong testosterone levels. That's very important. So why do we want to avoid either spikes in our sugars after eating? In other words, we've eaten the wrong shit, or we've eaten too much of it. Our sugar has spiked. It's gone sky high. Again, you can get it on your tester, figure out exactly where you're at. Sky high means anything over, high is over 120 after eating. Sky high is over 140 after eating. At 140, it's trying to damage your brain, the tissues of your brain. It's just very, very bad. So how do we know that we are at the right place after eating? Very simple. You get the tester, and after your meal, typically about an hour is when your sugars are going to peak in your bloodstream. You test it, and you see, okay, I'm doing great. I didn't overdo it today. I wasn't a big slob, right? And then at about 2 hours, you should have normalized and gone down to, again, somewhere between 70 and 85, which is a normal, healthy number for men and women. By the way, this part is not gender specific. So continuing as to the things that happen in the body, the wonderful things that happen in the body when we're managing our sugars properly, when we're not destroying ourselves, when our insulin is doing its job quickly, efficiently, with just a drop, just a little drop of that insulin into the bloodstream, gets the glucose out of the blood and into the cells and tissues. It's the reason, if you've ever asked yourself why a child can eat a piece of chocolate cake or the entire freaking cake and he's fine the next day, or a teenager, he can still go and run a 10K or do his track and field or do his whatever. You and I, however, are destroyed. Why? Because we have weakened our body's sensitivity to insulin. We don't respond the way that we used to. Well, we can get that back. This is the good news. You can get back that sensitivity. You can get back that ability to respond the way your body needs to the insulin. And some of the reasons are quite compelling to me as to why we want to have a well-managed level of sugar in the body. Again, no spikes, and we don't want it consistently high either. So we want to avoid two things. A, we don't want to go over 120 when we eat. And B, we want to have it consistently at normal levels, meaning around 70 to 85. Again, that's outside of meal times. Obviously, when you eat, it goes up. It needs to. Obviously, you've got to put the sugar somewhere. It goes into the bloodstream, and that's fine after you've eaten. But we want to avoid those spikes, like I say, over 120 after eating. And we want to avoid a situation where all day long, we're at 95 or 100 or 110. We don't want that. So those are the two things we want to avoid: spikes and consistently being high. Let me give you just 4 reasons why this management of sugar is so important. Number 1, the body, when it's in an environment of healthy, low sugars, healthy, low insulin levels. In other words, when it's not going crazy, feeding and pumping itself with insulin in order to try to get rid of the peasant food that I just gorged on. When the body's not doing that, it's operating normally. It's got a nice baseline. Its sugars and insulin are nice and low and healthy. At that point, the body can create new neural connections. So in other words, it's making your brain stronger, more dynamic, essentially smarter. Well, high insulin interferes with this process. And that's one of the reasons that, and the scientists are still researching this kind of stuff. That's one of the reasons why people get dementia and forgetfulness and early onset of Alzheimer's at the age of 50 sometimes, or even younger. All these kinds of things are linked definitely to high levels of sugar and having that resistance to insulin. So that's number 1 thing that we want to have. We want to have the body allowing us to be smarter and smarter and more sharp over time. You can have that, men. Just because you're aging at 50 or 60 or 70 doesn't mean you have to become stupid or forgetful or any of that. That is bullshit if anyone tells you that. So that's number 1 reason. Number 2 is the body, when it's in an environment of low glucose and healthy low insulin, can do its job of eliminating toxins, eliminating something called free radicals. We want to get this stuff out of our blood, and the body has so many wonderful mechanisms. God did not screw up. He gave us so many mechanisms to deal with the toxins that we breathe, that we drink, that we eat, that we're exposed to in our lives. The body has a tremendous resilience and ability to combat these things and to clear the body of these things, but only if we allow it. And having a low glucose, low insulin environment is definitely key to that. Number 3 is fighting cancer. None of us want a tumor, benign, and especially not malignant. Well, the body does its job of fighting these things off naturally quite well if we let it. And that means largely, again, keeping the sugars low, the insulin low. Very, very important factors in combating cancer. Did you know that cancer has been around, that we know of, for a couple of 100 years? For example, it has been theorized that Napoleon actually died of stomach cancer. And Napoleon was well over 200 years ago, almost 300 years ago. So cancer has been around, but its prevalence, right? The number of people in society who get it has just skyrocketed in the last 30, 40, 50 years. So it's not something that needs to be happening to this degree. It's now a situation where in America, 40% of us are going to get cancer in our lifetimes. Gentlemen, that is not acceptable. That is not what I want for you. That's not what you want for yourselves. So again, that's the reason number 3, why having a good, healthy level of sugars in the body, glucose, and insulin, nice and low, is a very beneficial and positive and strong thing for you. It's that ability to fight cancer. And then number 4 is, this is more of an aesthetic one, if you will, something for looking good. We all want to look good. Absolutely. We want to be healthy. That's number 1. Number 2, of course you want to look good. Well, the other thing that happens when we've got that low healthy sugar, that low healthy level of insulin, is we're fighting fat, eliminating fat. The body eliminates those love handles, that freaking paunch or belly or party ball, right? That too many of us men have allowed to form onto our bodies, or the big excess ass, or the big excess in the thighs. Yeah, sure, you want to have strong thighs, of course, but does it have to be a big ham? Does it need to look like a recently slaughtered pig was just stuffed inside your pants and you're walking around with 2 of these things? No, we don't want the excess fat. We want strong, lean muscles. And the body accumulates fat when we've got too much glucose running around in it, and when we haven't done our job of keeping the glucose and insulin to a healthy level. And this is very, very important. Essentially what's happening is, I'll explain it here briefly. Insulin is one of the most powerful hormones in the body. It's second maybe only to adrenaline. Adrenaline is the stuff you get a shot of when your child's in danger, or historically, hundreds of years ago, you were facing a predator, whether it was a lion or saber tooth. That would have been thousands of years ago, right? Or whatever it is. Or an enemy army is attacking you at dawn, or those pre-dawn hours. That's why God gave us the ability to quickly pump up our adrenaline. It sends the body into that fight or flight, and we do what we have to do. Adrenaline, very, very powerful. And we'll talk about that in another broadcast. But insulin is second only to that hormone in its power on the body. And it's so, so important at what it does. Again, it keeps us alive by getting that sugar out of our bloodstream and delivering it to the right places. We want the energy in the cells, but we don't want it poisoning us by staying in the bloodstream. So insulin is very important that way. But it's so important that it can override, it can overwhelm, it can stop and interfere with other processes. Some of them are the ones I've mentioned, for example, fighting cancer, getting rid of free radicals in the body, these toxins, things like that. Those are some of the functions that stop happening if we let our insulin get too high. But one of the other reasons why it's so important is that having the low insulin is so important is that the body does its job of eliminating fats only in a low insulin environment. In other words, when that pancreas secretes that insulin in order to get rid of the sugars, it also tells the body, gentlemen, we are temporarily in emergency mode. We got to get these damn glucose molecules, this sugar, out of the bloodstream and deliver it into the tissues of the body. The last thing we have time for right now is to look good and fight and eliminate fats. So screw you. If you keep feeding me all these carbs day after day, night after night, week after week, and month after month, I'm going to go ahead and reward you with some love handles and a big, juicy, floppy ass or a big belly in front of you. That's what the body does because it's got no other recourse. It's either got to save your life by getting rid of that excess sugar energy that you fed it constantly in excess, right? Or it's going to lean you out by getting rid of the fats. See, it's essentially choosing to go for the quick energy, which are the sugars first, versus the slow working, deeper energy, which are the fats. So that's one very important kind of aesthetic or visual reason why it's also important to have good low glucose and low insulin. I mean, who wants to be going around fat? Not only does it not look nice, but the really more important thing about it isn't the look. Looking nice is important. It's nice, sure, but it's secondary. The real issue is, do we want to build up all that fat throughout our torso and near our heart and liver and other organs? No, we don't want that. That's why it's important to keep those the fat levels nice and low. And again, we achieve that most easily by having a good, healthy, low insulin and sugar level. So we've talked about the importance of low, well-managed glucose. We've talked about the insulin, which is the hormone from the pancreas that keeps that sugar in the body nice and low at a healthy level. I've also talked about the fact that a healthy number is between 70 and 85. That's throughout the day. That's essentially your your normal operating number, between 70 and 85. We've talked about the fact that after eating, it should never go up. It really shouldn't go above 120. It should not. And if it goes above 140, you're really screwing up and you're in that poisonous territory or range. So let's see what mine is right now. I ate a couple of hours ago. Pull out my handy device here. The strips are the things that actually do the testing because they absorb the blood. The strips look like this. Very simple little thing. It gets attached to this particular tester. It gets attached to the top of it. It's got a groove there. Very simple. Very simple. Even a child can work this thing. That activates the display. You see it turning on. You see what looks like a drop of blood. In this case, it's saying, okay, I'm ready. Go ahead and prick your finger. Well, I take off this cap right here from this part. Very simple. Take off the cap. Find a new needle. This particular needle, it's encased in plastic for safety. Twist it a couple of times to sort of break that protective film that keeps it attached, right? I'll put this little guy back on, the plastic cap, and then I sort of pull this front piece down here to kind of trigger it so that it's ready to go. And then I just put any part of any finger, to really be drawn from any part of the body, right here to the top. I prick it. You could barely hear it. You can see how much blood it pulls out, which is almost none, just a tiny, tiny amount of blood. Then I put that here, connect it to the side of this strip, and it does the job of absorbing the blood. You can see the countdown there, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We get our final number of 74. So that's a perfect number. To be there throughout the day is great. Anywhere between 70 and 85, perfectly normal and healthy. It means you're treating your body right. You're not gorging. You're doing a lot of things right and allowing the body to heal itself. Who doesn't want the body to heal itself, gentlemen? At the age of 50 plus, you can actually get younger if you're doing some of these things and managing your sugars right. Send me your comments. Send me your questions. Would love to help. I invite you to join the conversation with myself and other men and what we're all doing to find that inner savage and bring them to life. Not only for our benefit, but for the benefit of those around us, people we care about. All right, man, stay strong.